Hello everyone, and welcome to the 39th rip-off episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring the targets from Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. After Ezio spared Rodrigo Borgia in the vault, Rodrigo took a back seat, but then came his son, Cesare Borgia, and his generals who attacked Monteriggioni, daring Ezio to take the fight to Rome. The Borgia are shown to have corrupted Rome and had zero regard for the people. The targets in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood are arguably worse and more evil than the ones in 2, as they were barely Templars by name even. Still, the targets all probably have their reasons for their heinousness, and today we will discuss each of them. Now in general, I'm going to focus on Cesare Borgia and his generals. While killed in the main story, the executioner doesn't count. Got that? Also, DLC targets don't count either. So without further ado, let's begin. In the quest to take down Cesare Borgia and his generals, Ezio worked tirelessly to waver Borgia Influence in Rome. The first of Cesare's generals he killed was one of his cousins, Juan Borgia the Elder, assigned as a cardinal as soon as his uncle Rodrigo was elected pope. We see that Juan Borgia was immensely corrupt, spending insane amounts of money on lavish sex parties. Like many of the targets in the previous game, Juan Borgia was basically a Templar by convenience rather than through ideology. Given Templars centuries later were disgusted by the Borgia waving the Templar banner, the Templars in this game are completely dishonorable scumbags, and Juan continues that tradition. Juan Borgia was assigned as Cesare's banker, but I doubt he was the most responsible with finances, given his spending on lavish parties with all the tax money acquired in Rome. That seems to be most of what he did as one of Cesare's generals. Earned nothing, got everything he wanted, and also showed no remorse for his lifestyle. On the brink of death, he does make the defense that he gave the people what they wanted, but Ezio points out that a true man of strength and power would steer clear from mortal pleasures. Basically, it can be concluded that Juan Borgia never had to work a day in his life, a testament to his overweight nature and thinking he could do whatever he wanted. He was no military commander, and nothing he did, he earned. And it's clear that he didn't care about how he did things. After all, he basically tried to coerce a courtesan into doing what he wanted after trying to blackmail her with the fact that she stole his guard's money. One last thing to point out, being a cardinal, it was pretty blasphemous to engage in sex parties, because higher-ranking Catholic leaders typically are ordered to remain celibate, pretty much evidence that the Borgia only obtained the papacy to secure power across Italy. Octavian was very much alike to Juan, born into wealth and earned nothing a day in his life. He was born royalty, and despite being a military commander, saw direct combat as barbaric and beneath him. The dude was pompous and way in over his head. On top of this, he held insane amounts of arrogance. His fellow generals and his superior Cesare were pretty much as dishonorable as he was, and he believed all he needed to do was buy loyalty, amassed through his family's wealth. It's why his enemies held no respect for him, and his underhanded tactics, like kidnapping his arch-rival's wife and demanding her husband surrender to him. What's interesting, however, is unlike the other targets, Octavian actually shows some remorse for his actions on the brink of death, remarking to Ezio that he needs more time to gain the respect of others, time he did not have, which is interesting. Octavian deep down was insecure. Being a coward, he never fought alongside his troops, and only ensured loyalty through money, rather than being a genuine leader who inspired his troops. However, he had plenty of time before his death to prove to his enemies that he was more than just a spineless coward, and he didn't achieve anything in the end. His troops bought through coin would have abandoned his flag once he died, and he did nothing to inspire them to keep going. Octavian may have recognized this, but he didn't want to put in any of the hard work required to earn respect. There's one other aspect I wanted to talk about, and that's Octavian expecting Cesare to turn Italy into an extension of France, in which it's stated that Octavian is a fool to expect as much. This seems to be another extension of the man's pay for respect approach, where if his purse was big enough, he could turn Italy into France. but obviously that's not how it works. So to summarize Octavian, he was an insecure, however over-entitled general who cheapened his way to the top. And while he knew it on the brink of death and how much he wasted his life, it was too little, too late. And I imagine he ended up forgotten by the history books. Micheletto Corella was by far the most loyal of Cesare's generals, serving as one of his bodyguards and his chief enforcer. It's said that Micheletto and Cesare started off as close friends, who grew up together. Although, as it's made clear in the narrative, Cesare cared for absolutely no one, and he betrayed Micheletto later down the line. Before then, Micheletto is characterized as a more reserved and quiet man, serving as Cesare's enforcer. I suspect the reason why he was so loyal to Cesare was because of the fact that he was his childhood friend, that he would follow him to the bitter end, regardless of what Cesare did, and the countless atrocities he committed, Micheletto himself being complicit in them. While not featured in the game itself, external material details Cesare betraying Micheletto, which ultimately shows that Cesare had no true care for the man who was probably his closest friend. We'll get to Cesare himself soon, but Micheletto up until that point was devoted to Cesare's goals of conquering Italy. It's also worth noting that he was deadly efficient as an enforcer, as it's established that while strangulation was his favorite means of execution, he knew at least 150 other methods. And his first failure seemed to be at the hands of Ezio, the master assassin who outclassed most of everyone. There isn't really much more to say about Micheletto, as his quiet nature doesn't give us a lot to go off of, but if I had to guess, Micheletto's devotion to Cesare is based upon their childhood friendship, which ended up being one-sided. But before then, Micheletto valued that friendship, and had next to no regard for what carrying out Cesare's orders meant. And to be fair, he kind of brought his demise on himself, but at the time, couldn't see that Cesare merely saw him as a pawn to serve his own ends. Cesare Borgia, as the main antagonist of Brotherhood, is responsible for a lot. He followed in his father's footsteps by making the mistake of provoking Ezio and the Assassin Brotherhood by attacking Monteregione, and not by accident either, as we see he deliberately spoke out to Ezio, all the while executing his uncle Mario, calling for him to bring the battle to Rome. And so he did. Except when Cesare started to lose influence in Rome, he was wholly ungrateful and unaware of the fact that he played himself in ensuring his own demise. Cesare was far worse than his father, as he wasn't even acting under the Templar banner, and can pretty much be described as a Templar in name only. He is shown to be without empathy, as he murdered anyone who got in his way, such as his brother, killed out of nothing more than spite. It can be said at the very least that Rodrigo Borgia, as with all his children it seems, raised them to be extensions of himself. That's why they were all so cutthroat and ruthless. Cesare was no exception, as we see an absolutely rotten and selfish man who had zero regard for anything but his personal success. One of his biggest and most hateable traits is his inability to take accountability, whether it be from his own father, the Pope, or Ezio Auditore. When things started to turn against him, he had no concept of personal failure. After all, even when being arrested after being cast out from Rome itself, he cried that he would be free again, with utmost confidence. And while he was right, it's probably only due to dedication to restoring his throne. He convinced his cousin to help him, but at the end of the day, he was only delaying the inevitable. He also held a god complex, as moments before his death, he boasted to Ezio that he was invincible and that no man could kill him. And that might actually explain his heinousness, that he believed himself above men, and so he could do whatever he wanted, and everyone had to bow down before him. With that being said, Cesare Borgia stands out as one of Assassin's Creed's most evil antagonists. And that's where I wanted to talk about the relation between the Italian Templars and the Renaissance. Compared to the Templars in the Holy Land, the Templars throughout Ezio's journey have no higher goal than domination and power. We see that most sects of the Templar Order have at least some standards when it comes to their ethical conduct. And as I said in the video about the original game, the Templars did not discriminate when it came to recruits. But this is also a weakness, as this includes recruiting those without empathy or honor. That's what I feel happened to the Templar Order in the Renaissance. Rodrigo Borgia found his way to the top and used the Templar banner as a means to obtain even more power. For completely selfish reasons. He corrupted the already questionable philosophy of the Templar Order into something far worse. And while later Templars were absolutely disgusted by the Borgia, feeling that they turned the Templar cause into their own selfish pursuit of power and dominance, I think it's also a reflection of the flawed philosophy of the Templars. The Templars seek peace through control, and an argument could be made that it was ultimately Rodrigo Borgia's endgame. Although the thing was, he had an unimaginable cruelty to execute his plans. We did see in the first game how Marjadine was completely selfish and had no noble intentions through extremism. This is basically what happens when someone like Marjadine becomes leader of the Templar Order. And given the Templars' lax recruitment practices, a tyrant like Rodrigo Borgia was inevitable throughout the thousands of years of history. On top of that, Cesare technically became the de facto leader of the Templar Order after killing his father, but not once was his goal in service to the Templar banner. He kind of just inherited the faction, but didn't care either way. So the Italian Templars didn't even have a clear direction after Rodrigo Borgia died. I imagine that it took the Templars decades to recover because of how hated the Borgia were, and probably found a struggle to continue what many would have seen as honoring the Borgia, the absolute worst of the worst. So that's the targets in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. They all reflect the worst of humankind, all engaging in gluttony, selfishness, and cruelty. They were all detestable, and only Octavian showed remorse in the end. As for the rest, they were an absolutely unhinged evil. Thank you for listening to this episode of Analyzing Evil. What do you think of the targets? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm Ginger Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?